two different followers of the Gulen movement that have left the movement that talk deeply about the corruption, the immigration fraud, the H-1B visas that have been issued in the thousands to bring different followers of Fethullah Gulen to work in their schools or to work in the mini constellation of non-profit organizations and things like construction companies that are building the schools. The corruption is beyond belief. Many people believed, they wouldn't believe it when we showed this film. And you know, it's my film 6 months ago when we were finishing it was called a conspiracy film. The only conspiracy here is the Gulen conspiracy.
That's
this is factual. We have first-person point of view from many people that have been affected by this group negatively. And it's time for our media to wake up to this. I have to say, you, David, were one of the few people to actually talk openly about the Gulen movement in the United States. Other people like Adam Curry, Stephanie Stahl of 60 Minutes, Stephanie Stahl of New York Times and Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes were really the handful of people that reported on this. And I have to commend you for that.
Well, thank you. You know, when we see something like this, we don't we go through it and we look at it, and if it's true, we don't. No matter how crazy it sounds to people. I mean, this does sound crazy when you look at it, and it is crazy. But if it's true, you've got to put this out there. You know, when we reported about this, I did an article. You're talking about getting on this. I interviewed you, and then shortly after that, when the Erdogan government began to sue the Gulen network here in America, I reported on that lawsuit, and I went back and reported some on our interview that we had when you first came out. Now, that was December 14th. And then within 2 weeks, we got our site hacked. And it was interesting that when they hacked our site, what they put up was a story supposedly coming from me, okay, and I write very few articles here at InfoWars, but a story coming from me saying, breaking, coup d'etat in Turkey. Erdogan flees to U.S. airbase, and talking about how it was a military coup in Turkey. Essentially predicting this 7.5 months earlier, a warning to us, a warning to Erdogan. I guess they thought we were Erdogan's surrogate here, criticizing Gulen. We don't see Erdogan as a good guy either. And I thought it was interesting when I saw this happening on Friday that there was a Turkish coup going on there. I said, oh, what's happened with the Gulen movement this week? So I quickly looked to see what had happened the preceding week. I saw there had been multiple arrests of people that had been accused of being Gulenists, that even though they've had court cases before, they had the largest indictment they'd ever had. Gulen himself and many others were facing multiple life sentences, being with the accusations from the Erdogan movement. And that indictment had been delivered just the day or so before that, and just 2 hours before the coup began, they had delivered that indictment wanting an extradition of Fethullah Gulen from Pennsylvania back to Turkey, and then the coup begins, okay? So I kind of don't think that it was a false flag by Erdogan. I think that all indications point to the fact that it is possibly this guy who is trying to take over our U.S. educational system.
Well, what I was told over the last 2 days since the coup occurred is that this has nothing to do with Erdogan, creating his own coup. They would have asked for Gulen's extradition anyway.
Yeah.
Those files, as you say, were finally finished on Friday, the morning before the coup. There were some other things happening in the background in Turkey. As I understand it, there were a number of military officers and other people that are in the Turkish military that are followers of Gulen, because Gulen has infiltrated the Turkish military, their judiciary, their police force. They have a lot of people in the media in Turkey. But anyway, these particular men in the military were followers of Fethullah Gulen, and they were going to lose their commissions. So this was a last-moment attempt, I believe, to prevent the Gulen movement from actually being completely eradicated from Turkey. But it's still our problem here in the United States.
That's the key thing, yes.
Lives here in the United States. He earns millions and millions of dollars from taxpayers here, and he operates our schools here, many charter schools.
We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the leverage that Erdogan has against the United States with these nuclear weapons at this air base that they closed down. They said they're not going to open up that air base unless they get their extradition. And, of course, there's a lot of nuclear weapons there. We're going to talk about the details of that with Mark Hall. Killing Ed is the film. You can buy it at Amazon.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and I'm here with documentary filmmaker Mark Hall. His film is Killing Ed. And we're talking about not only the Turkish coup and the two different polls and political polls in Turkey, but we're also talking about a coup that is really coming at our educational system here in America through the charter school system. And that's what his documentary film Killing Ed is about. It is now, you can get it on DVD at Amazon.com. It's been shut down at a lot of film festivals because, you know, the way we do things now in the United States is if you don't agree with somebody on an issue, you don't debate them. You just make sure that you censor them. And we see this happening with the Vaxxed documentary at Tribeca. They didn't like that documentary's content. They didn't want the information to be out there. They didn't feel like they could debate that. We see that over and over again with the climate change debate. They don't want to debate that. They would rather shut it down and accuse people that are that disagree with them of being racketeering, influence, corrupt, you know, trying to come after them with a RICO statute. That's what we see now. We see people trying to jail the competition, but at least pervasively to censor a different idea than the mainstream media is trying to sell us. So it's very important for us to get this information out. I want to talk to Mark now about this lawsuit that was filed by Erdogan's lawyers. And I understand it's Erdogan. Yeah, he corrected me in this. I've been using the southern pronunciation here, but this is a lawsuit that's been filed both in Texas and California, where there's a lot of the Gulen schools in both of these states, and they're looking at a couple of different issues. One of them, the H-1B visa program, which has gotten some discussion in terms of our open borders. Before we do, real quickly, I want to remind you that we have a sale now going on in DNA Force, and of course, that's one of our premier ingredients, our premier supplements that we have. One of the ingredients in it costs $30,000 per batch, so this is a very expensive supplement that we have. I think it's perhaps our most expensive supplement we have, so this is a good time to stock up on it or to try it when it's 25% off. You can look at the clinical studies. A lot of people have done clinical studies on Bio-PQQ compound. That's one of the key ingredients in this. That's what makes it so expensive. Extremely hard to secure, extremely expensive to buy, but Bio-PQQ is incredibly potent in terms of antioxidants. It also has CoQ10, other digestive enzymes, resveratrol, and many other things in that formulation of DNA Force. But take a look at the studies, take a look at the reviews on Infowars.com, and get DNA Force right now while it's 25% off at InfoWarsLife.com. Okay, now, Mark, let's talk a little bit about this lawsuit that's been filed by the lawyers for Erdogan here. It's filed with the Texas Educational Agency. Talk to us about the issues with the H-1B program and how they believe they allege that's being abused.
Well, one of the things that's happened in the Gulen charter schools is that there's been tremendous abuses of immigration, our immigration system. They brought in not only teachers, but they brought in people like principals and accountants. And, of course, these are displacing U.S. workers. I mean, it's a real labor problem when we have so many people out of work in our country. They bring in Turkish teachers because one of the things that you find throughout the charter schools that are run by followers of Fethullah Gulen in the United States is that they teach a kind of Turkish supremacism. Instead of teaching Spanish, they're teaching Turkish language to our children here in Texas.
That's amazing.
So it's really, you know, not a useful thing for those of us that are living on the border with Mexico.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you need to know not Mexico or Spanish, but you need or anything about any of the countries around here or Texas. You need to know about Turkey, according to them. And that's the amazing thing too. When you talk about them bringing in people, and they say in the lawsuit here, legal counsel, budget analysts, human resource professionals, principals, superintendents, counselors, etc. These are not positions for which they can't find Americans to fill these jobs. But the key thing I think people need to understand is that this is a school that is financed by the taxpayers. So these are taxpayer-paid positions. They're bringing people in here instead of using Americans to fill these positions in these schools.
Absolutely, David. And one of the things we show in the film through interviews with one of the former members of the Gulen movement who taught at a charter school in Ohio is that all teachers that come over on H-1B visas, they're followers of Fethullah Gulen, and they have sworn out an oath of secrecy as well as fealty, let's say, to Fethullah Gulen and this Islamic movement, which is global in nature. And one of the things that they've sworn to is to kick back a certain amount of their income each pay period back to the Gulen movement and to the compound in Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania, where Gulen lives. It's anywhere from between 10 and 30% of their salary. It's kicked back in cash to a Turkish administrator running these schools throughout our country. And I believe that money is definitely being used for non-educational purposes. And of course, this could have gone back to Turkey. I don't want to speculate, but it would make sense to me that that money perhaps has been used to foment this coup.
Yeah, and of course, it's not just that, but it also alleges that that has been happening with the contractors who build the physical buildings there. That's one of the reasons why they don't put this up for competitive bidding, is because that is filtering back to that organization. One of the ways that they answered this statement, and here's Harmony's statement, they say, the rate of teachers under the H-1B visas, which are authorized and issued by the U.S. federal government, is only 7% and decreasing each year.
It's a lie.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what he says. He said that this, in response to that, he says the statement is both misleading and false. He says, first of all, they only talk about teachers, and they exclude all these other issues that we're talking about in terms of lawyers, human resource professionals, budget analysts, principals, and so forth. They exclude all that. And Harmony, in fact, identifies itself to the federal government as an H-1B dependent, which means that at least 15% of its workforce was hired through H-1B visa programs. So they will reply to this lawsuit, to the complaint to the Texas Education Agency, and say, no, it's only 7%, when they're telling the federal government that they have 15% or more.
Well, this is one of the things we can do as Americans, is we can petition organizations like the Texas Education Agency, as well as the similar agency in California, that have both received these requests from the Erdogan government, of whom I do not agree with. I believe both Gulen and Erdogan are political Islam followers. They're Islamists. Mm-hmm. We haven't been helping those that we really should have been helping in Turkey, and now we're facing the consequences of it. This is it's a story that it's really truth is stranger than fiction. But to get back to the H-1B visa issue, these H-1B visa holders coming in that are Gulen followers, they are to be paid a prevailing wage. That prevailing wage is to make sure that our American citizens, our neighbors, are not undercut by foreign labor. It's a requirement by the Department of Labor. What happens is the Gulen members come in. They may be paid $40,000 or $44,000 a year for a position at the school, for which they're not really qualified generally. Mm-hmm. They're not certified. We don't know their backgrounds. And the deal is that they're going to kick back thousands and thousands of dollars per paycheck from that $44,000. We interviewed a teacher at one of the schools, and I've heard this over and over again, who was paid maybe a fourth of what her Turkish counterpart, who had the same experience, was paid at one of the Harmony schools here in Texas.
Wow.
So it's a massive scam. They're skimming money out of construction contracts, other contracts that Gulen owners, Gulen follower owners are operating to service the schools, to do other things here in the United States. And it's something that our media, our politicians, our academicians, everyone should be concerned about.
We're talking about people not being concerned about it. We've got a lot of officials who are given junkets to go to Turkey. Okay, it's a lot of congressmen, a lot of local officials, our police chief here. They send them on junkets to Turkey and push Turkish culture and other things to them. I don't know what else is going on these junkets. But, you know, they present themselves as being schools of science and math. Why? Because so many people are fed up with what Bill Ayers and his people have done to our educational system, turning them into social justice warriors where they don't learn anything. They're simply indoctrinated. So they know people are hungry for science and math, and yet only 42% of these Turkish teachers teach math or science, okay? It's a game that they're playing here to take over our educational system. Stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about what's going on with the nuclear bases as well as with ISIS in Turkey. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight here with Mark Hall, documentary filmmaker, producer of Killing Ed. You can now get this on DVD at Amazon.com. You need to see this film because you need to understand it's not just the Turkish coup that's going on, but we have a coup going on against our educational system. We were just talking about this, how difficult it is for people to understand some of these things where they reach so far. People say, that can't be possible. I can't imagine a situation where you've got a Turkish imam who comes here with the help and the assistance of the CIA, and then they set up a system using charter schools, get $500 million a year to try